Glad to be here. Good evening, ladies and gentle drunks. Welcome to the fourth dimension. Big book study, that is. My name is Kevin Olson. I'm a recovered alcoholic. I'm glad you're all here. I know I'm certainly glad I'm here, and I'm glad God's here, and I'm glad the big book is here. And let's get into it together. As we always do, let's begin tonight with the set-aside prayer. If you will, say along with me. God, please help me to set aside everything I think I know about you, about me, about my fellow man, about the 12 steps. And please allow me to gain a fresh new vision, perspective, and understanding of what you, what me, what my fellow man, and the 12 steps are all about. Amen. Okay. And as this is the fourth dimension big book study, I always like to read the two places in our book that refer to the fourth dimension. First of all, on page 8, Bill Wilson writes that I was soon to be catapulted into what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness, and a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. And then on page 25, Bill Wilson writes that we have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed. Brothers and sisters, we're going to be catapulted. We're going to be rocketed. Let's get into it tonight together. And for the sake of tradition, would everyone who has their video on, everyone please put one hand up like this. That includes you, Andrew Engelhardt. I see you there. One hand, just follow directions, Andrew. Follow directions. That's all we have to do. Just one hand, okay? And now the other hand. And then raise the roof. Oh, yeah. All right. Okay, let's get into it. We're going to continue in the chapter more about alcoholism. And last week we went through an exercise in particular of understanding that in this particular chapter, Bill Wilson refers to a lot of different things. So refer to the delusion, the illusion, the curious mental blank spot, the peculiar mental twist, the desperate experiment, so on and so forth. And it was important for me to understand and to learn that all those different things that he is talking about, in all of those situations, he's referring to the same thing. He's referring to one thing, singularly, and that is the insanity of alcoholism. And when we talk about the insanity of alcoholism, I am not referring to the crazy, insane things that I did when I was drinking. Those are just war stories. Those are just drunkalogs. That is not the insanity of alcoholism. The insanity of alcoholism is that I will do all of those same things again when I pick up a drink. I have no choice as to whether or not I'm going to pick up a drink. Okay? A great speaker by the name of Earl Hightower says, I didn't have a drug of choice. I had a drug of no choice. A drug of no choice, and that drug of no choice was alcohol. I'm going to drink again. Step one is not a declaration that I'm never going to drink again. I thought it was. I thought you came to AA and said, that's it. Hell's bells. I'm done forever. With and without solemn oath. I'm through forever. The alcoholic national anthem. And the real gut level surrender of alcoholism for me, in that surrender, the moment that I conceded to my innermost self that I was truly alcoholic. We read step one last week, where step one is in the book. And I think it's well to go through that again. But in that moment, what I'm really conceding is that for me, what I'm really surrendering to is the hopelessness of my situation. The hopelessness of my situation, that I am in a trap from which there is no escape, and that I am most definitely going to drink again. That's what, for me, step one is really about. Step one is about a surrender to the fact that I cannot and will never be able to keep myself sober. If I could have, I would have by now. I like to ask sponsees that sometimes. Don't you think if you could have kept sober on your own, you would have done it by now? Like, what are you waiting for? If you're able to do it, just go ahead and do it. Just go exert some willpower and see how that works. And invariably, we find some of us a day later, some of us a week. The book we read last week says, try to stay sober for a year. See what happens. Most of us will be drunk within a few weeks. Some of us, we will be drunk the next day. And I remember reading that and thinking, my God, man, I'm a next day guy. I couldn't stay sober 24 hours when I came to AA. And I mean that quite literally. So I think it's important to understand once more where step one is in our book, okay? And what we're talking about here is conceding to our innermost selves that we were truly alcoholic. This is the first step in recovery, okay? And that's what I needed to do. I needed to concede to my innermost self. And I talked about this last week, how I did that where I was when that happened, okay? In a treatment center, on my knees, conceding. And so we're on page 30, guys, if you want to join me on page 30, okay? A lot of times we'll talk about, you know, where is step one? We point up on the wall and say, well, see, it says we admitted we're powerless over alcohol, and that, like, that's not step one. That's step one on the wall. But where step one occurs in our book, it's quite clear. Page 30, right here. Okay, second paragraph. We learned we had to concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. Okay, this is the first condition for sobriety. The first condition for sobriety, as Chuck Chamberlain says, in Alcoholics Anonymous, the first condition is that I concede to my innermost self that I am an alcoholic. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently maybe, has to be smashed. And the scary thing about that delusion, the delusion that I'm like other people, or that I presently may be, is that it can happen suddenly. I can be around AA, going to meetings with this, you know, have a sponsor, working, you know, Kevin's program, not the program, but working Kevin's program, working, you know, a version of AA, I like to call AA light, okay? AA light, you know, 0 calorie AA, all right? And working just enough of an honest program to know how to work it dishonestly, okay? Taking half measures, watered down AA across the board, and suddenly the thought will come that I'm like other people and I'm going to be able to drink safely, okay? And we're going to see suddenly tonight, we're going to continue reading through these stories, and we're going to see suddenly, and it's so horrifying to me. It's so horrifying to me that every time I suddenly had that thought that convinced me to start drinking again, I suddenly had that thought, I was as physically sober as I am right now. That tells me that drinking is not my problem, man. My problem, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. Didn't we read that in the chapter, There is a Solution? Okay, and remember, we came to understand that the mind is really the nexus point between the intellect and the soul, the spirit. So the main problem of the alcoholic, the way that I understand it, is that I have a mental insanity that tells me it's going to be okay to drink. But that mental insanity is fueled by this deep spiritual sickness, this spiritual malady. Okay. And when I attempt what Bill Wilson calls the desperate experiment of picking up a drink again, desperate experiment, that's what it was. Where does that desperation come from? Why am I desperate? What am I desperate for? I'm desperate for relief from that spiritual sickness, from the restlessness, the irritability, the discontent, the loneliness, the emptiness, the depression, the anger. Alcoholism, I believe today, brothers and sisters, is a disease that begins when I stop drinking. People think alcoholism is a drinking problem. No, not for me, man. Alcoholism was a drinking solution. Okay, I have an unusual response to alcohol once I start drinking it, physical allergy, but I also have an unusual reaction to sobriety. Okay, you take alcohol away from me, I don't get better. I get worse. I get sicker. I get crazier. People used to say, Kevin, stop drinking. You'll feel better. And they were right. I felt anger much better when I was sober. I felt depression much better when I was sober. Okay, that's the reality. Okay, and I start drinking again as a desperate experiment to find that sense of ease and comfort. And the last thing I want to say about it, and then we'll get back into the reading. The last thing I want to say is the reason I'm an alcoholic who is not drinking today and has not taken a drink of alcohol in a little over 15 years is because I have found in Alcoholics Anonymous what I was always looking for in that desperate experiment. I have found in AA what I was always looking for in that bottle. And that is, I have found a way to feel ease and comfort in sobriety. Alcohol, my grand sponsor, Clancy, likes to say that the purpose of Alcoholics Anonymous is to do slowly what alcohol used to do quickly. And that is to change my perception of the world, my perception of reality, and to change the level of my ease and comfort in sobriety. Does that make sense, you guys? So what I want to do tonight is we're going to continue reading through these stories. Brad, my man Brad, do you remember exactly where we left off?
I was trying to remember. Did we read about a man of 30?
We did read about a man of 30, and I don't think we read the Jaywalker yet. But
no,
let's
start.
We're going to start on page 34. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to start on page 34 tonight. And we're going to read for those who are unable to drink moderately. That's where we're going to start tonight. Now we're going to read through. Say again, Brad.
That's where I think we are.
I think so too. Thank you very much for that. So we're going to read through some stories tonight. Okay, we're going to read through Jim. We're going to read through Fred, and we're going to read the Jaywalker. Okay, so we're going to meet Jim tonight. We're going to meet the Jaywalker, and we're going to meet Fred. And in all these cases, I want you to really zero in, really focus in on not their drinking problem, but I want you to zero in on the exact moment that these guys go crazy. They have an insane thought that tells them this time it's going to be okay. This time it's going to be different. This time, I'm going to drink just a little bit. One of the biggest lies I ever told myself. Anyone here ever relapsed after coming to AA one time? Come to AA and then gone back out and drank again? Okay. One of the biggest lies that I ever told myself is I'll go back to AA tomorrow. Okay. I'm going to go out and just drink for tonight and just get I see some nodding heads. Okay. I see some nodding heads. You are my people. Okay. Because that's how selfish I am. I'll let those people in AA keep the doors open and keep the coffee on and get those books and order all the stuff and have the meeting so that someday when I'm done drinking, I'll grace them with my presence again. Okay. But for tonight, I'm just going to go out drinking a little bit. That got some laughs, eh? Okay. It's always so hard to tell on Zoom if a joke lands or not. You can never tell because there's no laughter. It's a lot different than being in front of people. So, Andrew Engelhardt, you just give me a thumbs up if I'm funny. Okay, you just 2 thumbs up I get. That's it. I would lie. I would lie to myself and tell myself I'm gonna go back to AA tomorrow. I'm gonna go out and just drink for one night, just tonight, and I'll go back to AA tomorrow. As if I had some control over when I could start and when I would shut it down. There is nothing in my background that would indicate I can turn it on and turn it off when I want to. Okay. Somebody once told me, okay, for me to decide to start drinking again is like having sex with a gorilla. It is not over until the gorilla says it's over. Okay. That's it. Okay. It's like getting on a runaway train. One of the Andrew liked that one. That's 2 thumbs up. Tells you where he's at. Anyway, no, I'm kidding. I love this analogy, man. My friend Janessa talked about this one. Anyone who comes to Primary Purpose Group knows Janessa. In Canada, where I live, we have ice. Are you familiar with ice? I know. And for all the drug addicts out there, I mean physical ice. I don't mean crystal. Anyway, that got some laughs too. Well done. All right. Okay. So for me, drinking again is like getting in a car, driving as fast as I can on a sheet of pure ice. Okay. Towards a brick wall. It does not matter what I do or how hard I try to slam on those brakes. It is not going to make a difference. Once I start drinking, that car is going into that wall and there's nothing I can do. And I'm slamming on that brake. You know what that brake is? That brake is willpower. That brake is willpower. Okay, it's of absolutely no use. That car is going into that wall every time I get behind the wheel, every time I pick up a drink. So anyway, all of that to say, guys, I know I'm rambling a little bit, but when we talk through, we're going to go through Jim, we're going to go through the Jaywalker, and we're going to go through Fred. And tonight, really simply, guys, all I want you to do is zero in on at what moment exactly did they have an insane thought? At what moment in sobriety, sober, did they have a thought that told them this time it was going to be okay? And it's very easy to see. It's very easy for us to see. It's hard to see when it's me in my own mind trying to figure this out, okay? Because to me, it's a bad idea, it's a bad idea, it's a bad idea, it's a bad idea until suddenly it's a good idea. Suddenly, it's a Tuesday night, man. Suddenly, just a little bit. I'm just going to go to the liquor store. I'm not going to drink whiskey this time, though. I'm just going to get 6 beers and I'll shut it down after that and I'll go back to AA tomorrow. Okay, we all know what that sounds like. And when we go through the cycle stories, do you guys know what I'm referring to? You remember this, the cycle stories that we talk about? And when we go through those cycle stories, one of the most important things that I want my sponsees to be able to do is to pinpoint what was the exact thought that they had. What was the exact thought? Because I want them to see how deceptive and cunning and baffling and powerful, like a serpent, like a viper, our minds can be. Okay, I want them to zero in on exactly what was the insane thought they had prior to drinking. So one of the ways that we can get some reps in and kind of flex that muscle is by looking at Jim, looking at the man of 30, looking at Fred, and seeing from our perspective at what point did they have this insane thought. Are you guys with me? Give me a thumbs up if you're with me. Yeah. All right, let's get into it.
Hey, everybody,
Brad,
I'm Brad,
page
the
34.
alcoholic.
Hey, Brad, thank you for reading for us tonight.
My pleasure, as always. For those who are unable to drink moderately, the question is how to stop altogether. We are assuming, of course, that the reader desires to stop. Whether such a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which he has already lost the power to choose whether he will drink or not. Many of us felt that we had plenty of character. There was a tremendous urge to cease forever, yet we found it impossible. This is the baffling feature of alcoholism as we know it, this utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or the wish.
Okay, so I think we talked about this a little bit last week, but I just want to hammer it home. Okay, they're talking about non-spiritual basis. Whether a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which they've already lost the power to choose whether he will drink or not. Okay, again, we're talking about choice. Do I have a choice as to whether or not I'm going to drink again? The answer is no. Fueled by this deep spiritual sickness, I have an insane thought that tells me that I am not able to overcome, this insane thought that tells me it's going to be okay to drink again. Despite all my efforts and all my willpower, this curious mental blank spot, this peculiar mental twist, the illusion, the delusion, I believe the lie again in sobriety and pick up this drink. So what they're saying here is that some people are able to quit on a non-spiritual basis, and some people, like real alcoholics of my type, are not. Now, do you guys remember in the chapter, There Is a Solution, we talked about heavy drinkers versus real alcoholics, okay? And I just want to touch back on that for a minute, okay? Because what are some non-spiritual ways that people might try to stop drinking? Okay, I know we talked about this last week, but I'm just going to review. People will get into a relationship. People will start exercising more. People focus on their career. People will say, I'm just going to do yoga. People will say, I've got this Deepak Chopra book, and he's going to be my spiritual guide, and that's going to be good. And I'm not going to, that's it. I'm done. I'm through forever. Okay. And all of those things may work for someone who is just a heavy drinker. Okay. Someone who has not lost the power to choose whether they will drink or not. Okay. Why have they not lost that power? Because in my experience, they do not suffer from the same degree of spiritual sickness, or neuroticism is another way to think about it, as the real alcoholic. A person like me, though, you take alcohol away, as I've said, I don't get better, I get worse. I've got a very bad strain of this disease. And when I say that, I don't mean I drink a lot. What I mean is that I have to take a very big dose of medicine in order to stay well in Alcoholics Anonymous. If I start to deviate even 2% and start to slack off, I will get crazy, and it does not take long. Okay. And I've accepted that about myself. I have to do all of this stuff. And we talked about the danger in AA of having people who are just heavy drinkers in AA. Do you guys remember talking about this? I see Liza nodding. I see a couple people nodding, right? The danger is that they come in, heavy drinkers come into our meeting, and the newcomer hears two things. He hears the heavy drinkers say, well, all I had to do was join a volleyball team and, start to, get a couple extra hours at work. And then I fell in love with my girlfriend. And ever since then, I haven't had to take a drink. And then the newcomer hears, crazy Kevin Olson saying anything short of a spiritual awakening and I'm doomed to die an alcoholic death. It was absolutely necessary for me to completely surrender to the disease that I have, do deep levels of inventory and confession, sitting down with my sponsor, talking about all the stuff I've ever done. Then I had to go ask God to remove all the defects of my character, all my shortcomings. Then I had to go make amends to all the people that I harmed. I had to make a list of all those people and go revisit them, go pay back all that money. Then I had to continue taking inventory. I had to get deeply involved in prayer and meditation. And then at the end of all that, I had to go carry that message to other people, go be of service to other alcoholics. Anything short of that, and I'm doomed. The newcomer here's like, I like the sounds of volleyball. Like that's that sounds a little hard, okay, to me. That's a little rough, okay? But the truth is, if that newcomer is a real alcoholic like me, going and joining that volleyball team is going to be a death sentence for him, okay, as it was for me. I don't like watered down AA. And the reason I don't like watered down AA is the same reason I didn't like watered down drinks, man, because it doesn't have the same effect. Okay. And when I water down AA, when I take this middle of the road half measure solution, I'm just telling you guys, it didn't work for me. When I tried to work Kevin's program, it didn't work for me. Okay. I need the whole deal, and I am not able to quit upon a non-spiritual basis. Okay. I have surrendered to the fact that anything short of spiritual awakening as the result of the 12 steps and diligent, disciplined practice to the commitments I have in Alcoholics Anonymous and my home group, primary purpose group, anything short of that, I'm going to go crazy again. And I've also learned through my defects of character that I can cause just as much havoc in my life and cause just as much pain and never take a drink. Just living solely on selfishness and self-centeredness and dishonesty. And I'm able to do that, and I have done that, okay? And we learn these things. So anyway, I just wanted to talk about that. Back to you, Brad, page 34. How then shall we help?
How then shall we help our readers determine, to their own satisfaction, whether they are one of us? The experiment of quitting for a period of time will be helpful, but we think we can render an even greater service to alcoholic sufferers and perhaps to the medical fraternity. So we shall describe some of the mental states that precede a relapse into drinking, for obviously this is the crux of the problem. What sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink?
So that's my favorite. Again, we're talking about like synonyms, if you will, synonyms for the insanity of alcoholism. That's one of my favorites, the desperate experiment. I know about that desperation. I have lived and felt that desperation many times. And that desperation is fueled by this deep sense of spiritual pain that we experience as alcoholics. Dr. Silkworth calls it restlessness, irritability, discontent, loneliness, depression, anger, emptiness. Alcoholics know exactly what it's like to feel empty. Okay. And that's what I'm looking for, man. My sponsor, my grand sponsor, Clancy, says, like, the whole world turns gray, and I just want to, get a little technicolor. Okay, get a little technicolor back in my life. That's what my grand sponsor says. I just want a little technicolor life. Okay, and anyway, so that's why we drink again. That's why we drink again. Back to you, Brad.
What sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after? Okay, the desperate experiment of the first drink. Friends who have reasoned with him after a spree which has brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy are mystified when he walks directly into a saloon. Why does he? Of what is he thinking? Our first example is a friend we shall call Jim. This man has a charming wife and family. He inherited a lucrative automobile agency. He had a World War record. He is a good salesman. Everybody likes him. He's an intelligent man, normal so far as we can see, except for a nervous disposition. He did no drinking until he was 35. In a few years, he became so violent when intoxicated that he had to be committed. On leaving the asylum, he came into contact with us. We told him what we knew of alcoholism and the answer we had found. He made a beginning. His family was reassembled, and he began to work as a salesman for the business he had lost through drinking. All went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. To his consternation, he found himself drunk half a dozen times in rapid succession. On each of these occasions, we worked with him, reviewing carefully what had happened. He agreed he was a real alcoholic and in a serious condition. He knew he faced another trip to the asylum if he kept on. Moreover, he would lose his family for whom he had a deep affection.
Okay, so one of the things that I just want to point out for anyone who is unaware or not familiar with this, anytime in the big book they say asylum, just think treatment center. Okay, when they wrote the big book, they didn't have treatment centers, and so people like us would go to the psychiatric ward. Now, don't get me wrong, people like us still go to the psychiatric ward. I happen to have frequented a few in my time, that's for sure. Okay, but today, rather than go to the Deb like that one, today we go to treatment centers. Okay, so if you're like, what's an asylum? I don't understand. Just think treatment center. And this is so simple, guys. It says he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. And you may be thinking, oh God, you know, what is that? How do I enlarge my spiritual life? Okay, we have a very simple 12-step method. Okay, and what it's really saying, and you can make a little note when it says he failed to enlarge his spiritual life, it's very simple. He did not do the 12 steps, period. That's it. Okay, he came to AA, probably did a week step 1, 2, 3, did half of a step 4. Okay, you know, or a dishonest step 5, and that was it. And started to drift away and started to focus on all the other things that we want to put in the center. I started to focus, oh, I got to get my money right. Okay, I got to get back, and I got to get my girlfriend back. I got to, like, all the stuff that we want to worship, as opposed to worshiping God. Okay, and enlarging our life through the 12 steps. So that's what he did. And just, you know, I completely understand. I see it all the time. I've done it myself. Okay, so from the outside looking in, and like, yeah, I understand not enlarging my spiritual life. And let's see how that works for him. Let's see what happens.
Yet he got drunk again.
No, you're kidding.
No, it says right there. We asked him to tell us exactly how it happened. This is his story. I came to work on Tuesday morning. I remember I felt irritated that I had to be a salesman for a concern I once owned. I had a few words with the boss, but nothing serious. Then I decided to drive into the country and see one of my prospects for a car. On the way, I felt hungry, so I stopped at a roadside place where they have a bar. I had no intention of drinking.
Okay, so I just want to pause here. I just want to point out, okay, one of the things when we go through that cycle of alcoholism and we get to the, you know, what happens during our period of sobriety, okay, while you're physically sober, in that restlessness, irritability, discontent, tell me how you were feeling, tell me what was going on with you. Well, look at this guy, okay? He's filled with resentment, okay? He has to go to work for a business that he used to own. And now he's got to go take guff from his boss. Well, I used to own this place. It says he felt irritated, okay? You can see the spiritual sickness all over this guy, okay? And so now he's going to go, and by the way, I used to think, like, why was he driving out to a roadside place to sell a car? That doesn't make any sense. I found out since looking at it historically in the 1930s, that's how they sold cars. They had a car and they would drive out to prospective customers to show them the cars. They didn't have dealerships like they do now. So that's what he was doing. And he's driving out to this roadside place. Is he planning on drinking today? No intention of drinking. And I remember the last night that I drank, I swore on a stack of Bibles, I am not drinking tonight. I am not drinking. I've been to AA many times. The last time I drank, I was 9 months sober. I was around AA. I had a sponsor-ish, okay? I had a sponsor. I don't know if he knew that he was my sponsor, but I had a sponsor. Okay. Okay. And I was around, and I'm not drinking tonight. No intention of drinking. Okay. Let's see what happens.
I just thought I would get a sandwich. I also had the notion that I might find a customer for a car at this place. It was familiar, for I had been going to it for years. I'd eaten there many times during the months I was sober. I sat down at a table and ordered a sandwich and a glass of milk. Still no thought of drinking.
No thought of drinking, no insane thinking either. This is all normal, sane thinking. And then he says, I ordered another sandwich and decided to have another glass of milk. Hey, nothing wrong with that. If you're hungry enough, okay, you can have 2 sandwiches, 2 glasses of milk. No thought of drinking whatsoever.
Suddenly,
There it is.
Suddenly,
There it
the
is.
thought
At
crossed
my home group, guys, I want to tell you, at my home group, we talk about this word a lot. Suddenly. That is how, and that should be horrifying to everyone on this call. I know it's horrifying to me. Just like that. It creeps up until one day it just grabs you by the jugular. Okay. And you know, the term relapse, guys, I think I talked about this last week, but I'm going to say it again. The term relapse we use incorrectly all the time, because we say he relapsed. And what we mean by that is he took a drink, he relapsed. Okay. We think that's the beginning of his relapse. And in reality, for men or women that relapse, the taking of the drink is the end of the relapse. The relapse is the slow erosion of everything that I have not been doing in AA up until the point, brick by brick, building a wall between me and any type of a spiritual defense, until once again, alcoholism has me in complete isolation, and now it's making the rules, man. It's making the rules, and that's how it goes, and I become a slave. I'm either going to become, guys, and this might sound a little harsh, but I'm either going to become a slave to the dictates of a higher power in Alcoholics Anonymous, or I'm going to become a slave to booze and drugs again. One way or another. One way or another. What's my choice to be? All right. Okay. Brad, back to you.
Suddenly, the thought crossed my mind that if I were to put an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it couldn't hurt me on a full stomach.
Absolutely insane.
I ordered a whiskey and poured it into the milk. I vaguely sensed I was not being any too smart, but I felt reassured as I was taking the whiskey on a full stomach.
I'll tell you, those are words to live by. Someday, you know, Kevin, when I pass off this mortal plane, they'll bury me, and I'll have a tombstone that'll say Kevin Olson, you know, born this day, died this day, quoting, vaguely sensed he wasn't being too smart. Okay. Okay. And I can have that vague sense. It doesn't just have to be regarding drinking. It can be regarding a lot of things. Okay. When I intuitively think that what I'm about to do is really stupid, maybe I should listen to that thought, or at the very least call my sponsor. Please, God, let me help me call my sponsor and let him get his hand on the steering wheel before I turn this sucker back into the brick wall. Okay. When I vaguely sense I'm not being too smart, I need to listen to that, man. I need to listen to that. Brad, back to you.
The experiment went so well that I ordered another whiskey and poured it into more milk. That didn't seem to bother me, so I tried another.
Of course, because what has he triggered now? Anybody, unmute yourselves. Anyone who's new, none of the usual suspects, anyone who's new or relatively new. Liza, do you know what is he triggered now? What do you think?
The allergy of the mind? Or
The allergy of the body. The allergy, well, you get partial marks for that. The allergy of the body. He's triggered the physical allergy, right? It manifests itself in the phenomenon of craving. Excellent, though, Liza. I love that you got that. Perfect, James. Exactly. Now that he's had the insane thought, he had that when he was sober. Now he's picked up the drink. Now the drink is going to take him, man. And we see what happens.
Thus started one more journey to the asylum for Jim. Here was the threat of commitment, the loss of family and position, to say nothing of that intense mental and physical suffering which drinking always caused him. He had much knowledge about himself as an alcoholic, yet all reasons for not drinking were easily pushed aside in favor of the foolish idea that he could take whiskey if only he mixed it with milk. Whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. How can such a lack of proportion of the ability to think straight be called anything else?
Okay, so there's a really good definition of alcoholic insanity, right from our co-founders. A lack of proportion of the ability to think straight. Okay. And by the way, guys, it says he had much knowledge of himself as an alcoholic. To me, when our book talks about self-knowledge not being a solution, I want you guys to understand that what I think that means is people come to AA and they learn that cycle. They learn all about the cycle of alcoholism. And they think that learning that cycle has somehow given them a solution. And the cycle of alcoholism, guys, I'm sorry to say, is not a solution. Learning the cycle is simply learning what my problem is. Okay, but it does not mean that I have discovered a solution to that problem. Solution to that problem has got to be a psychic change or a spiritual awakening. Okay, just knowing this cycle. Okay, Jim knew this cycle. He knew, he had much knowledge of himself as an alcoholic, but knowing that was not enough in that moment to help him see and distinguish the true from the false. True things looked false to him and false things looked true to him. And he believed the lie, took the drink, and he was gone again. All right, back to you, Brad.
You may think this an extreme case. To us, it is not far-fetched, for this kind of thinking has been characteristic of every single one of us. We have sometimes reflected more than Jim did upon the consequences, but there was always the curious mental phenomena that, parallel with our sound reasoning, there inevitably ran some insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink. Our sound reasoning failed to hold us in check. The insane idea won out. Next day, we would ask ourselves in all earnestness and sincerity how it could have happened. In some circumstances, we have gone out deliberately to get drunk, feeling ourselves justified by nervousness, anger, worry, depression, jealousy, or the like. But even in this type of beginning, we were obliged to admit that our justification for a spree was insanely insufficient in the light of what always happened. We now see that when we began to drink deliberately instead of casually, there was little serious or effective thought during the period of premeditation of what the terrific consequences might be.
So, listen, guys, this is really important, that paragraph that we just read, okay? Because a lot of people, a lot of guys, and I'm one of them, by the time I got to AA again, after relapsing again and again, I was no longer in a place where when I drank, I thought this time it'll be different, or this time I'll take just a few, or this time I knew, man, you know, quoting again my grand sponsor Clancy, hey, people say, Kevin, for you to drink is to die. It's like, yeah, if I'm ready to drink, I'm ready to die, man. I hope I do. I want to die when I drink again. And I'm not saying that to be dramatic. I'm not saying that to be, you know, some type of Hollywood hero or anything like that. That's just the reality. I don't drink socially. I drink suicidal. So I would say that, and I would be like, well, maybe this mental obsession doesn't apply to me. My case is a little bit different, I guess. I'm a little special and unique, I guess, different than you people, because I don't have those thoughts. I'm much more jaded than you are. I don't think it's going to be different. Okay. Well, listen, this paragraph we just read nailed me to the wall, because that's what I was doing. I was drinking deliberately instead of casually, feeling myself justified, always justified by nervousness, anger, worry, depression, jealousy, or trauma. Okay. I would use trauma that happened to me as a kid as a justification, as an excuse to pick up a drink again. We're going to talk more about that when we get into step 4. And it's a delicate thing to talk about, because trauma is a real thing. Trauma is very real. And if you're here and you've experienced trauma, I have a lot of compassion for you, and I'm here to help you. And I can tell you that I've worked through all the childhood trauma that I dealt with, and I'm still in some therapy, some outside stuff. Here's the problem for drunks, though, is that I will warp trauma into something much more hideous, and that is self-pity. And I will use it as an excuse and a justification for my ongoing alcoholic behavior. Okay. And I did that for years, man. I rode that pony as long as I could. I'll change trauma. I'll warp it into something that sounds a lot like trauma, rhymes with trauma. The word is drama. Okay. And I had to get real about that. I had to stop. I had to start, in fact, taking responsibility for that trauma. Okay. And it wasn't until I was sober for 4 years in AA with a solid foundation, my relationship with God, my relationship with my sponsor, supported by a strong home group for the first time that I had the strength to go and deal with that stuff. In the meantime, I was going out deliberately all the time. Raise your hand if you've ever gotten drunk at someone. I'm going to go get drunk. I'm so mad at that person that happened to me when I was a kid or later in my life or whatever. I'm so mad at them. I'm going to go get drunk at them. Okay. Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. There is only one category of people on planet Earth who get drunk at other people. And that is people like us, fueled by this desire to deliberately get drunk, feeling myself justified. Justified. That word is lethal for drunks. Lethal. Justified. I'm justified in doing this. Gross and deadly, okay? Because there's little serious effective thought on what or premeditation of what the horrific consequences are going to be, okay? I think I'm going to drink. I don't care what happens. I don't care. And then I go drink and I drink for 4 days and I absolutely destroy everything and I emerge remorseful. And guess what? Suddenly I care again. Suddenly I care a lot again. Okay, it's insanity. It's insanity. It's just a different form of insanity. But I didn't know it was in our book. It took me years of studying this book before I found that. And I realized, oh my God, there it is. There it is. Those times that I went out justified thinking I'm going to get drunk tonight. I don't care what happens. There it is. That's me right there. Okay, back to you, Brad.
Our behavior is as absurd and incomprehensible with respect to the first drink as that of an individual with a passion, say, for jaywalking. He gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. He enjoys himself for a few years in spite of friendly warnings. Up to this point, you would label him as a foolish chap having queer ideas of fun. Luck then deserts him, and he is slightly injured several times in succession. You would expect him, if he were normal, to cut it out. Presently, he is hit again, and this time he has a fractured skull. Within a week after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley car breaks his arm. He tells you he has decided walking for good, but in a few weeks he breaks both legs.
Okay, so he's going to stop jaywalking for good. He says the jaywalker's national anthem, I'm never going to jaywalk again. That's it. I'm through. I've emerged remorseful with a firm resolution not to jaywalk again. And at some point he has an insane thought that tells him this time it's going to be different, and he breaks both legs.
On through the years, this conduct continues, accompanied by his continual promises to be careful or to keep off the streets altogether. Finally, he can no longer work. His wife gets a divorce, and he is held up to ridicule. He tries every known means to get the jaywalking idea out of his head. He shuts himself up in an asylum, hoping to mend his ways, but the day he comes out, he races in front of a fire engine, which breaks his back. Such a man would be crazy, wouldn't he? You may think our illustration is too ridiculous, but is it? We who have been through the ringer have to admit if we substituted alcoholism for jaywalking, the illustration would fit us exactly. However intelligent we may have been in other respects where alcohol has been involved, we have been strangely insane. It's strong language, but isn't it true?
You know, this story reminds me of the fact that every time I go through that cycle of alcoholism, my spiritual condition, my restlessness, irritability, discontent gets worse every time. So you think, why would this guy who just spent a year in an asylum, shuts himself up in an asylum hoping to mend his ways, but the day he gets out, he races in front of a fire engine, okay? Or that same for us, spend a year in a treatment center and get out and immediately go take a drink. Why would somebody do that? It's because when I get out of that treatment center, I feel typically very, very low. I don't feel good. I feel very low. I feel like I've let myself down. I feel like I'm not as good. I take a look at all the people and, living their lives. And I'm just this guy who just got out of a treatment center and I feel very low. And the only thing I know to do in a situation like that, unless that's a very, very 12-step based spiritual treatment center, I'm going to go to a bar. I'm going to take a drink, man. That's the desperate experiment. I understand that. I understand that completely. Getting out of treatment centers does not make me want to be sober. Getting out of treatment centers back into life and full of fear, full of depression. What's going to happen to me? What am I going to do? What does everyone think about me? That's a breeding ground for drinking if I ever heard one, man. Back to you, Brad.
Some of you are thinking, yes, what you tell us is true, but it doesn't fully apply. We admit we have some of these symptoms, but we have not gone to the extremes you fellows did, nor are we likely to, for we understand ourselves so well after what you have told us that such things cannot happen again. We have not lost everything in life through drinking, and we certainly do not intend to. Thanks for the information. That may be true of certain non-alcoholic people who, though drinking foolishly and heavily at the present time, are able to stop or moderate because their brains and bodies have not been damaged as ours were. But the
Okay, those are heavy drinkers, like we read about in the chapter, There Is a Solution.
But the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. This is a point we wish to emphasize and re-emphasize, to smash home upon our alcoholic readers, as it has been revealed to us out of a bitter experience. Let us take another illustration.
Okay, so now we've met Jim. So first we met the man at 30, then we met Jim, then we met the jaywalker. Now we're going to talk about Fred. Okay, we're going to see what Fred's story is. We should be able to finish by exactly 7 p.m. tonight, so that's good. Again, guys, what do we want to focus on? We want to take a look and see exactly at what moment does Fred, sober, have this insane thought. Okay? No, Fred, no, don't do it. Okay, that's what we want to look for. We want to look for when, at what point does he go crazy?
Fred is partner in a well-known accounting firm. His income is good, he has a fine home, is happily married, and the father of promising children of college age. He has so attractive a personality that he makes friends with everyone. If ever there was a successful businessman, it is Fred. To all appearance, he is stable, well-balanced individual. Yet he is alcoholic. We first saw Fred about a year ago in a hospital where he had gone to recover from a bad case of jitters. It was his first experience of this kind, and he was much ashamed of it. Far from admitting he was an alcoholic, he told himself he came to the hospital to rest his nerves. The doctor intimated strongly that he might be worse than he realized. For a few days, he was depressed about his condition. He made up his mind to quit drinking altogether. It never occurred to him that perhaps he could not do so. In spite of his character and standing, Fred would not believe himself an alcoholic, much less accept a spiritual remedy for his problem. We told him what we knew about alcoholism. He was interested and conceded that he had some of the symptoms, but he was a long way from admitting that he could do nothing about it himself. He was positive that this humiliating experience, plus the knowledge he had acquired, would keep him sober the rest of his life. Self-knowledge would fix it. We heard no more of Fred for a while. One day we were told that he was back in the hospital. This time he was quite shaky. He soon indicated he was anxious to see us. The story he told is most instructive, for here was a chap absolutely convinced he had to stop drinking, who had no excuse for drinking, who exhibited splendid judgment and determination in all his other concerns, yet was flat on his back nevertheless. Let him tell you about it. I was much impressed with what you fellows said about alcoholism, and I frankly did not believe it would be possible for me to drink again. I rather appreciated your ideas about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink, but I was confident it could not happen to me after what I had learned. I reasoned I was not so far advanced as most of you fellows, that I had been usually successful in licking my other personal problems, and that I would therefore be successful where you men failed. I felt I had every right to be self-confident, that it would be only a matter of exercising my willpower and keeping on guard.
You know, I identify with this guy, Fred, a lot. And one of the things I want to point out, our book says that outward appearances are not always inward reality. Okay. And my sponsor used to say about me, and it was similar for him, that we are masters of image maintenance, and that I can pretend on the outside that everything is well and everything is fine. And we know deep down within, we know what kind of snakes are slithering around in our mind. And we know at 3 o'clock in the morning how dark and empty and awful and angry and bitter and empty and lonely we feel. But on the outside, everything presents just fine. Okay, I remember I went into a psychiatrist one time and he had me do this stress test. And it was like, it was multiple choice, whatever. And I scored like 120 on this thing. And he was baffled because on that test, like a 70 is like a high score. 100 is like reason to, potentially think about committing someone to an insane asylum. And I scored a 120. And I remember him saying, like, Kevin, this is the scariest thing about this is that you do not look like a guy who would score 120 on this test. And I thought, well, thank you very much. Okay. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Okay. So anyway, I just say that because I understand this guy. We understand that although everything might be looking okay on the outside, outward appearances are not inward reality. And there may still, and in some cases, these are the sickest guys of all. The ones that are lying to themselves about how good they're doing. And, the first word I ever learned to say in AA was fantastic. Kevin, how you doing? Oh, fantastic. Just awesome. Yeah, just so happy to be sober. I can barely stand it, And it was great when I learned in AA that I didn't have to answer that way. And that if I was hurting, where else would I get honest about that? Okay. And people say that about primary purpose group, like, well, it's so overwhelming. Everyone's so happy and positive there. So I try to set an example. If I'm hurting in some way, I will let people at PPG know, because I want to create an atmosphere at our group where people can come and you can be hurt. You don't have to maintain your image at primary purpose group. If people are happy and feeling good and outgoing, they're not faking it. Okay. It's because the Spirit of God is working through them. Amen. Okay, I really hope that. But this guy, Fred, he's the craziest. He's the craziest of the bunch, man, because he's pretending everything's good on the outside. And we all know that I can do that. And on the inside, we know how bad it can be. Brad, back to you.
In this frame of mind, I went about my business, and for a time all was well. I had no trouble refusing drinks and began to wonder if I had not been making too hard work of a simple matter. One day I went to Washington to present some accounting evidence to a government bureau. I'd been out of town before during this particular dry spell, so there was nothing new about that. Physically, I felt fine. Neither did I have any pressing problems or worries. My business came off well. I was pleased and knew my partners would be too. It was the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon.
Again, everything looks fine. Zippity doo-dah, zippity day. And this cat is fixing to just go crazy in about 10 seconds. This guy's going to go bananas. Okay. And that used to really confuse me in this story. I didn't understand it. And I had to start thinking about my own experience. Like, the times when I started to drink again, it wasn't necessarily because things on the outside looked bad. It was because things on the inside were unbearable.
I went to my hotel and leisurely dressed for dinner. As I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to mind that it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. That was all, nothing more. I ordered a cocktail and my meal. Then I ordered.
Okay, so there it is. He just went crazy. Okay, he didn't have a drink. Now the next line is I ordered a cocktail and my meal. But before that, in the italics, he didn't have a drink. What did he have? He had a thought. That's it. He had a thought. And he believes the lie. After everything that he'd been through in AA, after all the self-knowledge, after sitting with the original members of AA, okay? The granddaddies of AA, man, the first 100, he's getting the real McCoy. He's getting the pure, uncut, Colombian, 100% AA. He's getting the good dope, okay? And that's it, man. He failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, and he believes the lie and drinks again.
I ordered a cocktail and my meal. Then I ordered another cocktail. After dinner, I decided to take a walk. When I returned to the hotel, it struck me a highball would be fine before going to bed, so I stepped into the bar and had one. I remember having several more that night and plenty next morning. I have a shadowy recollection of being in an airplane bound for New York and of finding a friendly taxi cab driver at the landing field instead of my wife. The driver escorted me about for several days. I know little of where I went or what I said and did. Then came the hospital with unbearable mental and physical suffering. As soon as I began,
I just want to take us back quickly to page XXVI in the doctor's opinion. I love this paragraph. The doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. As laymen, and just to say, this is Bill Wilson. This is the first 100 writing about what Dr. Soakworth has taught them. The doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. As laymen, our opinions as to its soundness may, of course, mean little. But as ex-problem drinkers, we can say that his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account. How can you account for what this guy is doing right now? Why would he do this? Why would you drink yourself into a puddle in the middle of that bar and then have no recollection and then catch a taxi when you're supposed to be meeting your wife? Why would he do that? Okay. Well, the doctor's theory that we have an allergy explains for many things that there is no other account. There is no other way to explain it other than that this cat is trapped. Fred is trapped at this point in a physical allergy beyond his control. Physical allergy manifests itself in the phenomenon of craving. And I can look back at my life, you know, and see that, you know, many times where I took a drink and the drink took me, man, and I wasn't in control anymore. And why? Well, it explained many things for which I could not otherwise account. Brad, back to you.
as soon as I regained my ability to think, I went carefully over that evening in Washington. Not only had I been off guard, I had made no fight whatever against the first drink. This time I had not thought of the consequences at all. I had commenced to drink as carelessly as though the cocktails were ginger ale. I now remembered what my alcoholic friends had told me, how they prophesied that if I had an alcoholic mind, the time and place would come. I would drink again. They said that though I did raise a defense, it would one day give way before some trivial reason to have a drink. Well, just that did happen and more. For what I had learned of alcoholism did not occur to me at all. I knew from that moment that I had an alcoholic mind. I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help in those strange mental blank spots. I had never been able to understand people who said that a problem had them hopelessly defeated. I knew then it was a crushing blow.
So we're talking about synonyms for the insanity. There's another great one: strange mental blank spot. And this is really where Fred is starting to really truly surrender to the hopelessness of his situation.
Two of the members of Alcoholics Anonymous came to see me. They grinned, which I didn't like so much, and then asked me if I thought myself alcoholic and if I were really licked this time. I had to concede both propositions. They piled on me heaps of evidence to the effect that an alcoholic mentality, such as I had exhibited in Washington, was a hopeless condition. They cited cases out of their own experience by the dozen. This process snuffed out the last flicker of conviction that I could do the job myself. Then they outlined it.
I just want to say as well on the bottom of page 41 and 42, again, he uses the word mind twice. So he said members of AA prophesized that if he had an alcoholic mind, the time would come that he would drink again. Then he says, I knew at that point that I had an alcoholic mind. Again, guys, when I hear mind, I think alcoholic mental and alcoholic spiritual. Okay, that's the combination of mental and spiritual I think of as mind. Okay.
Then they outlined the spiritual answer and program of action, which 100 of them had followed successfully. Though I had been only a nominal churchman, their proposals were not intellectually hard to swallow. But the program of action, though entirely sensible, was pretty drastic. It meant I would have to throw several lifelong conceptions out the window. That was not easy, but the moment I made up my mind to go through with the process, I had the curious feeling that my alcoholic condition was relieved, as in fact it proved to be. Quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles would solve all my problems. I have since been brought into a way of infinitely more satisfying and, I hope, more useful than the life I lived before. My old manner of life was by no means a bad one, but I would not exchange its best moments for the worst I have now. I would not go back to it even if I could. Fred's story speaks for itself. We hope it strikes home to thousands like him. He had felt only the first nip of the ringer. Most alcoholics have to be pretty badly mangled before they really commence to solve their problems. Many doctors and psychiatrists agree with our conclusions. One of
Sorry,
these
Brad, just 1 second, guys. We're gonna finish this. We're gonna finish this chapter. We'll be done, and then don't, if you can avoid it, don't drop off the call right away, because my favorite thing in the world is going around the circle and everyone introducing yourselves and just letting us know where you're from. It's my favorite thing. It's like, it's the best. So if you can stick around, please do so, and we'll wrap up here shortly.
Many doctors and psychiatrists agree with our conclusions. One of these men, staff member of a world-renowned hospital, recently made this statement to some of us. What you say about the general hopelessness of the average alcoholic's plight is, in my opinion, correct. As to two of you men whose stories I have heard, there is no doubt in my mind that you were 100% hopeless apart from divine help. Had you offered yourself as patients at this hospital, I would have not taken you if I had been able to avoid it. People like you are too heartbreaking. Though not a religious person, I have profound respect for the spiritual approach in such cases as yours. For most cases, there is virtually no other solution. Once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. Except in a few rare cases, neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a higher power.
Amen. Amen. Love it, guys. Awesome. Okay, well, let's close with the Lord's Prayer, and then we'll just go around the circle and everyone can say hello. All right. It's my favorite thing, man. I'm so glad we do it. Okay, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses,
as we forgive those who trespass against us.
and lead us not into temptation, deliver us from
but
evil.
deliver us
For
from
thine is
evil.
the
For
kingdom,
thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory,
forever and ever.
forever and ever. Amen.
And before